who's back? Back again. Hello guys, Turbocharged 51 over here, joined by Super Boosted. Hope you guys are having a splendid day wherever you are in the world. Boost, you ready for the second podcast in a row?
Yes, let's do it. I have coffee, so I am ready.
You mean Milo? Smilo. You need to smile for the Milo. Okay guys, once again starting this podcast off with the race results for the Austrian Grand Prix. Also just quickly watch the race highlights to have a little bit of a refresh. But Max Verstappen won for the second week in a row for Red Bull Racing Honda. But this time, unlike the previous weekend where Hamilton got the fastest lap, Hamilton was driving with a wounded car. Max got the fastest lap, so he banks a full on 26 points. Basically a perfect weekend, pole position plus the race and fastest lap. Bottas got P2 for Mercedes, much better weekend from Valtteri. Unfortunately 18 seconds behind the winner Verstappen, he banks 18 points. Norris in P3 for McLaren, fantastic weekend from Norris, 20 seconds behind Verstappen with 15 points in the bank. Then you've got Hamilton P4 for Mercedes, Sainz in P5 for Ferrari, with Perez P6 for Red Bull after his very penalized race. We'll talk about Perez later on. Ricciardo was in P8 for McLaren, much better weekend from Ricciardo, the second round running at the Red Bull ring. Leclerc in P8 for Ferrari, Gasly P9 for AlphaTauri, Alonso and in P10 with probably for me the battle of the season with George Russell in the final 10 laps. Alonso in P10 with securing the final point, Russell P11 for Williams, Tsunoda P12 for AlphaTauri, Stroll P13 for Aston Martin, 14th place was Giovinazzi for Alfa Romeo. Raikkonen was in P16 for Alfa Romeo. 16th was Nicholas Latifi for Williams. Sebastian Vettel unfortunately DNF'd out of the Grand Prix on the final lap because of an incident with Raikkonen. We'll talk about that a bit later. But still, even though Vettel was not classified, he was still ahead of both the Haas cars, which finished the race in P18 and P19. Schumacher in P18, Mazepin in P19. 2 laps down off of the leader Verstappen. And unfortunately, the second retirement was Esteban Ocon for Alpine due to the first lap incident with the Alfa Romeo of Antonio Giovinazzi. Now Boosted, let's head straight into the talking points, because I think after this one and once again doing a podcast about the race weekend format for Silverstone, we've got a lot of talking to do, so let's jump straight into it. First topic of talk. Traffic problems in quali was bad, and I'm specifically focusing on the Q2 incident between Alonso and Vettel. Now, after all the analysis were done, it was Aston Martin that didn't communicate properly to Vettel's race engineer. But basically, it cost Alonso a lot of points on Sunday, because for the second week at the Red Bull ring, it was clear that qualifying meant more than it did the previous week. And I think Alonso had the pace to get about, I honestly think he would have finished ahead of Leclerc in P8. I think Alonso would have been able to get P8 because the Alpine in the hands of Alonso had fantastic race pace. It was unfortunate that we couldn't see what Ocon could have done. But yeah, the traffic problems in quali, the main thing I want to come to is the stewards. I don't know, there needs to be stricter rules, especially for tracks like Austria where you want to tow. Tracks like Monza, we've seen the past few years how bad the traffic can be at Monza, and sometimes they're not even making the bloody line to start a lap. So, what is your opinion about this whole traffic issue around Austria?
For me, it's the drivers are the drivers are trying to reduce the tire temps and in case reduce the tire pressures.
Also true.
And they everyone wants that needed gap, and if everyone goes out at the same time, it's causing the problem, because one person wants to get ahead of the other one because he doesn't want to lose as much time and lose as much temperature. Look at Max Verstappen when he went out. He was always like he was racing because he tried to get ahead of everyone, and then he went for his lap. And for me, how the Red Bull ring is, that last 2 corners is designed, it's gonna make I think every time that's gonna happen, because it's so a place where that will happen. The traffic will happen because you don't want to slow down more earlier, because then you're not making with the rules the necessary time you need to get at the safety line time.
Yeah, also true, because the drivers do have a specific time limit. I actually don't know what that time limit is. It differs from track to track, but you can't take, if you take too much time, you will get penalized. And obviously I understand, because the Red Bull Ring is the quickest lap on the calendar, it's almost a sub 60-second lap. The driver going first, especially even in Q3, and the driver going last for their flying laps, I mean, the incident was in Q3, but even in the incident was in Q2, but it's a problem in Q3 as well. Because the lap goes so quickly, it's very fine margins. But traffic in Quali 1 and Quali 2 was insane. And I mean, really, I think it cost Alonso so much time. I understand you can't do anything about the track. You can't just suddenly make 3 more corners and the track is a kilometer longer. You can't do that. But it was really just, the main thing I want to get to is I feel the stewards need to be a little bit more strict when it comes to traffic situations, because this, not to a big extent, but to a small extent, does ruin the racing for us. Because I wanted to see what that Alpine was capable of, because Alonso was on fire the entire weekend. I mean, he was in the top 10 with all 3 practice sessions, really matching pace with McLaren and Ferrari, and due to a silly incident in Q2, he couldn't show the proper race pace of that Alpine because he was just stuck in traffic the whole race.
Yeah, I think if you take the Red Bull Ring, they need to make a specific instructor drivers, or give a specific rule out for that track. Let's say, don't slow down at turn 9 and 10, maybe let's make the line at 6, 7 or 5. Let them group up there and then just shoot.
Yeah.
Because if you gonna let everyone say no, don't slow at 9 and 10 and just before 9, the second last corner, this will happen, because one will be too close to the other driver and you will have to wait.
Yes.
And if they just, I don't know.
It's a really hard scenario, I'm not going to lie to you. It's a very tough situation, this, because the Red Bull Ring is such a quick lap. But with all the big smart guys up in the FIA, they need to sort something out, because Austria is not the only track with the Red Bull Ring is not the only track where this is going to be a problem. There are a fair few tracks on the calendar where this is a problem, where drivers either want to tow or they want to be far away from each other, and then they group up in the final sector. So there's something that the stewards need to look at, but I think Alonso was a lot of points were stolen from him due to this incident. And yes, Vettel did get a penalty. Was it a 3 or a 5 place grid penalty?
3.
So Vettel did get a grid penalty, but I mean, he wasn't even behind Alonso, the man who he cost the opportunity of Q3.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit north and south with this, but basically that's just the main thing that I want to come from. But moving on to the next topic. Now look, heading in towards the McLaren, Ricciardo had a much better weekend than he did the first week in Austria with the Styrian Grand Prix. But Ricciardo is still way too far off Norris. We said at the beginning of the season, after preseason testing, McLaren, in our opinions at that stage, were the team that would be the podium runners if Mercedes and Red Bull mess up. And it's clear that they are still there, just Ferrari have gotten a bit closer. They have to rival Ferrari now. But Ricciardo can't be half a minute behind his teammate at the end of the race. I think it was more. I think it was something like 37 seconds. Let's quickly see here. Norris came over the line 20 seconds behind Verstappen. Ricciardo was 60 seconds. It's a 40-second gap towards your teammate. That is, and honestly, I know we're being hard on Ricciardo, but Ricciardo is a proven race winner and a proven championship contender. He can't have this lack of pace. He needs to sort out his race pace. He needs to sort out his pace towards Norris. Quali, yes, you can have a little bit of grace, but race pace, he can't be 40 seconds behind his teammate, who also had a 5-second penalty.
Yeah, for me, it's like I said in the Styrian Grand Prix podcast, we recently said he's gonna put more time in the
in the simulator.
In the simulator, and I think one thing, yes, it's good. He's gonna put in time in the simulator and whatever else he's doing. But for me, it's like, why didn't you do it in the start of the year?
Exactly. Now, Ricciardo, even in his days back at Red Bull, Ricciardo and Toro Rosso, he wasn't a fan of the simulator because he felt it wasn't up to stats with modern Grand Prix. But with modern technology having such a big improving so quickly, he can't say that anymore. And the thing is, if you look at his teammate Norris, yes, Lando is younger, and yes, Lando has got a gaming YouTube channel, he's part of Quadrant, and all these things, but when it comes to the factory simulator, Norris is in there almost every single day. Danny Rick, just if this keeps going, we know Danny Rick. He's kind of like Alonso was in his earlier days. He likes to jump teams. And Ricciardo, if he wants to win a world championship like he's very clearly stated before in the past, he needs to put in the effort.
Yeah, he needs to put in the effort, because you can't go pointing and blaming, no, it's the car, and it's not the car. He is not used to that car. He is used to the Reynolds, and that's the thing. He needs to put in the time, like Sainz did.
Exactly, Sainz is the perfect example because he's already on pace with Leclerc.
I wouldn't say he's on pace, but he is pushing him.
Okay, race pace wise, he's on pace. Quali pace, there still needs to be work done, but nobody can deny Sainz is on race pace with Leclerc.
Yes, and that's the thing, because Sainz put in that effort, and he took the time, everything, because he wanted to prove he is worthy in the Ferrari seat. And Ricciardo, he has not put in that time that's needed.
And the main thing for me is, McLaren, even though I'm a Ferrari fan, the McLaren car is still quicker than the Ferrari. I mean, Norris qualified in P2. He was 4/100ths of a second behind Verstappen in quali trim. The McLaren is the quicker car. The thing is, if Ricciardo keeps putting in these performances where both Ferraris can finish ahead of him, and at some weekends like back at Spain when Norris does not have a good weekend and Ferrari are out in front, this can cost McLaren P3 in the constructors.
Yes, it will cost them, and if they keep finishing in front of him, it will also cost the constructors. And I think he really realized that he needs to put in the effort, and I'm glad he realized he needs to work on himself. And from now on we'll have to see how his effort reflects in the car.
Yeah, I mean, the first bite of the cherry is this weekend coming at Silverstone, especially with the weird race format with there's been 2 races.
He's getting 2 chances.
Yes, so Ricciardo really needs to show up this weekend at Silverstone. Otherwise, for the rest of the season, I've got a little bit of a worry for Ricciardo's sake. Because Zach Brown, obviously, just like Mercedes with Hamilton, it's clear that Norris is Zach Brown, the team boss at McLaren. It's clear that Norris is his little golden child. And with Norris, I can understand it because Norris is a fun guy. He's got a good personality, and he puts in the time and the effort. He's done that ever since he started in 2019 alongside Sainz. He was putting in the effort just like Sainz every single day of the week. And that is what Zach Brown loves. Norris is not a guy slacking off, and now because he's gained, I want to say, popularity with his big fan base and everything, he hasn't, slacked off and everything. He's still there every day of the week, pushing like a madman. And Ricciardo needs to follow that persona. But talking about Norris was on damn fire this weekend with the Austrian Grand Prix.
Yeah, he was. He went after the Austrian Grand Prix. He went and found some pace. I don't know where. Like they laughed in the after the race commentating. He said no, Austrian Grand Prix was 90% throttle, and this race he went full 100% throttle. If it was just that, well done for getting that 10%, because that 10% made a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, he finished P3, and if Mercedes didn't let Bottas pass, Norris would have gotten P2 because he would have gotten past Bottas. He was on fresher tyres, and Hamilton was driving a wounded car, Norris would have finished where he qualified, even with a 5-second penalty. And
if he didn't have that 5-second penalty, he would have probably finished P2 as well.
Exactly.
And chasing Verstappen.
Very true, because the McLaren, it's not just Norris who found pace, McLaren clearly found more pace in that car.
Yeah.
They did something right when it came to Austria. And one thing that I want to focus on, yes, I know Hamilton drove a wounded car, but that move on Hamilton into, what was it, T6 or 7? T7, T89, it's T7. That move on the inside was the move of the race. That was a phenomenal move up the inside. Hamilton couldn't defend, there was nothing he could do. I was just like, okay, you blocked me at the hairpin, so I'm just gonna quickly slip up your inside and make like a snot rocket and just go pew!
Yeah, he just showed the more superior grip, and with Hamilton having a wooden car, the more downforce, and that just showed what a difference makes from a wooden car and a wounded Mercedes and non-wounded Mercedes. Because I think if the Mercedes was not damaged, it would have been harder, but
I still think Norris would have gotten past.
I still also believe it, because
for this podcast, when you look at their engines, Mercedes, unlike Aston Martin and Williams, Mercedes gave McLaren a clause in the contract that says McLaren are allowed to work on their engine. Like, obviously McLaren can't do upgrades, but they can do different things with the engine than the Mercedes team. And the McLaren is quicker in a straight line than the Mercedes. Somehow that McLaren, as far as the eye can see, and as far as we as fans can determine, that McLaren is quicker in a straight line. I mean, just take the lap, the side-by-side lap on board that I sent to you guys over the group. Verstappen couldn't touch Norris in the straights with the quali trim.
No.
Verstappen, the only reason Verstappen got pole is because he's got a lot more grip in the corners, due to that upgrade that they brought, where they can run less downforce but still have the same cornering speed. If Norris had a little bit more downforce on that car, for the corners specifically, Norris would have been on pole position.
Yeah.
That thing is, I mean, look at the safety car restart. He was side by side with Sergio Perez heading up the hill, and the McLaren was just like, okay, are you searching for parking or am I just quick? And he just blasted away from Perez. And that to me is speaking volumes about what McLaren are not just doing with that chassis and with that aero, but with that engine. So, and I mean, that move on Hamilton, to get back to that was an absolutely insane move. Look, I'm not a Norris fan by any stretch of the mind, but I'm not gonna lie, this weekend Norris was driving like an absolute king.
Like I wanted to say, it's like, I think the Mercedes engine works better in the McLaren than the Mercedes.
Very possible, very possible. And the one thing that I want to take my hat off to for McLaren, I mean, we talked about it after preseason testing with that fancy rear diffuser that they had, but to adapt that car, because you basically have to do an entirely new chassis design, to adapt that car from Renault power to a Mercedes power unit, and being that quick with your first season with a new power unit, that is absolutely exceptional work from McLaren.
Yeah, that just shows they are putting in the necessary work. And talking of necessary, the unnecessary parts, what you feel like, and I think a lot of people feel like, was the 5-second penalty of Norris.
Look, the reason I think it was unnecessary for Norris's penalty, the corner where Perez got his second penalty, I also think Perez's first penalty was unnecessary when he pushed Leclerc off. The thing is, the difference between T6 and T4. T3, T4. The difference between T4 and T5. T4 is a hairpin. The fourth corner is a hairpin with gravel instantly on the outside. T5 is a sweeping left-hander where there's a big curb on the outside. T6, whatever, not the point. The hairpin into the next corner in the second sector. That corner, the second corner, is a sweeping left-hander, and there's a massive curb on the outside. If you push somebody into the gravel off of that curb, you are forcing them off the road. But the hairpin does not have that, what's the word I'm looking for? Does not have that lenience. It's curb gravel. And if you try and go around the outside, I think you need to understand it's either contact with the car next to you or the gravel. I don't feel that's a corner, especially if you know you're racing someone like Norris or Verstappen that's not going to give you, they're going to give you just enough room to work with. And unfortunately, when Perez tried to avoid making contact with Norris, he went into the gravel. So I feel the strictness of the penalties at the hairpin was a little bit too strict. I don't think Perez or Norris deserved their penalty for that, forcing somebody off track. But I do well feel the penalty for Perez, the 5-second penalty he gained, was necessary for when he pushed off Leclerc the second time. But when it comes to Norris, that was totally unnecessary. And basically that penalty, in my opinion, cost him P2, at least P2.
Yeah, well, I lost my place. What I thought about, look what Alonso did when he was battling Russell. He was also on the outside, but when he saw the gap is closing, he rather played it safe and backs off.
Yes.
All the other people who was pushed wide, they didn't want to back off. They wanted to prove their, I want to say, dominance and prove they are faster, and they were desperate to get past.
That what you said there, that's very true, because Perez was desperate to get past Norris. That I will admit, because then it would have been a Red Bull 1-2 and they wanted to be ahead of Mercedes. But it was lap 4.
Yeah.
I mean, Perez could literally have waited 1 or 2 more laps. Just wait for DRS to get enabled, dummy Norris and go to the inside, or just take him at the hairpin or anywhere else. But
that's the thing, with that hairpin, you have to decide. You hope he sees you and gives you that space, but if he's not giving that space, you're gonna go on the gravel.
Yeah, you're gonna end up in the gravel. You're gonna become a rallycross driver.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's such a fine space between you making that choice of backing off and just seeing if you're going to pass him later or going to the gravel. And I think the stewards decided that weekend was like, okay, no, we have to give them penalties because they have to give them that space.
I get that, but still, if you are the driver defending, and obviously I know Perez was literally almost side by side with Norris. I think his front wheels were just behind Norris's front wheels. But still, it's a downhill hairpin on the outside, and there's gravel literally right next to you. I mean, you wouldn't try a move like that at Monaco or at Singapore where there's barriers. So, in my opinion, it just needs to be like, Perez basically lost the podium because of not being patient. It's a 71 lap race. You've got many opportunities, and with DRS, the Honda would have been able to get past the McLaren. So, if Perez, I know he had the pressure from Bottas and Hamilton right behind him, but if Perez literally waited 2 laps, I think he would have easily gotten past Norris, and there wouldn't have been the problem with him and Leclerc.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't have been stuck in P10. So Perez, in my opinion, ruined his own race there. But Perez, like I said, I actually want to change that statement, because I said Perez, however, unlike Norris, his penalties were deserved. But his first penalty for Leclerc, not deserved, because it's the same scenario with Norris and Perez. But the second one I do, however, feel was deserved, because it was the second time he forced Leclerc off the road, and it was at T6 or T6.
Yeah,
whatever.
T6.
The sweeping left-hander, the first of the 2 sweeping left-handers. And literally, Leclerc was right alongside him. It wasn't the situation where it was half a car length behind where Leclerc must have backed out. He was side by side, and literally Perez kept forcing Leclerc off the road until Perez got his wheels on the green stuff and had a twitch of oversteer. But Leclerc was already in the gravel by then. So that 5-second penalty, I honestly feel was deserved. But just Perez, he had a very sloppy race weekend. This is not like the Perez we're used to seeing. It was a really uncharacteristic weekend from Perez.
Yeah, it was uncharacteristic, and I think at the second time, he didn't want to slow down to give Leclerc that space, because at that speed he had to slow down to keep the line he had to keep.
Also true.
And if he kept that line, Leclerc would have passed him.
Yeah, but I mean, Leclerc was obviously the faster car. Leclerc was on fresher tyres, and with all due respect to Perez, he couldn't get past Ricciardo to save his life. But this weekend, I honestly was mad at him, because it was not a good weekend. It was just sloppy racing, sloppy lines, and Perez, he didn't impress me at all this weekend compared to Verstappen. Verstappen was in another league compared to Perez this weekend.
Well, if you take Verstappen was in a league of his own compared to everyone.
Yeah, he was in a league of his own compared to everyone. You've got a good point there. But let's move on before we rage podcast about Perez. Well, me. And okay, now I know Esteban Ocon had an incident with Antonio Giovinazzi on the first lap. I said that when I went through the results. But Ocon once again fell out in Q1. And we talked about it in the previous podcast as well. Alonso had the pace to be in Q3 if it wasn't for Vettel blocking him at the beginning. We've talked in the beginning of this podcast as well, in the end of Q2. Where has Ocon's pace gone? The first 6 rounds, the first 5 rounds, because it started at Monaco, the first 5 rounds, Ocon was in a league of his own when you looked at the 2 Alpines. He was busy racing the Ferraris and the McLarens, and all of a sudden he's just nowhere.
With that scenario, it just makes me wondering, is Alonso the one that's overdriving the car and Ocon is actually the true pace of the Alpine, and the other cars, McLaren and Ferrari, just upgraded so much? That's where the Alpine is. That makes me think about the same thing is Alonso is in the points and Ocon is not.
Ocon is battling the Williams and Alfa Romeos and Aston Martins for no points positions, and Alonso is fighting the Alfa Tauris and okay, Stroll was also in the mix, but he's fighting the Alfa Tauris and the Ferraris for points. And I mean, obviously, Russell is the exception with the Williams, and also Alonso did not have the best strategy. He literally had to do tyre conservation for like 30 laps, and then he had better tyres than Russell at the end to make the move. But I mean, I honestly don't think Ocon is showing the true pace of the car. Yes, I do think Fernando is overdriving, but I think Ocon is also underperforming. I think neither of them are showing the true pace of that Alpine. I mean, the car, when you look back at races like Portugal and Spain, that car was quick. It was bad strategies that cost them points. And you can't tell me within 3-4 races that car is all of a sudden behind an Alfa Romeo and a Williams. Well, behind an Alfa Romeo and an Aston Martin. I can't. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think after Monaco, it was just mainly speed races that was mainly on top speed. So we'll have to see at Silverstone. It's high speed corners, so
it's a high downforce, high speed track. So
we'll see if Ocon does better there. Otherwise, if he doesn't really do much better, I think he's off pace.
No, most definitely. And I want to see how far he's off Alonso, not just in the race, but in qualifying as well.
Yeah.
We have to keep an eye on Ocon. But now, moving on to the next Alpine topic. The Alonso/Russell battle, for me, was not just the battle of the race, it was the battle of the season. A seasoned veteran against a new... I wouldn't say Russell is no longer a rookie, no, by no imagine of the mind, but Russell is the young gun. To see those two go wheel to wheel for so many corners, I mean, that part where Alonso ran around the outside of the exact corner where Leclerc got pushed off by Perez, and even still backed out, but still them going side by side for 3 corners in a row. Such clean and proper racing. That is the racing that we should have seen with the whole Perez/Norris/Leclerc situation. That's what we should have seen. Those two guys proved exactly what wheel-to-wheel Formula 1 racing is, and it was absolutely phenomenal to see Alonso and Russell just duking it out.
Yeah, for me, I think the other drivers can actually learn from that, because that shows the experience from Alonso, knowing where to push and where not to push.
Yeah, where to stick your nose in and where to back out.
Because if you can keep on sticking your nose in and hoping the other guys will back down, they are way higher in the grid. So everyone at that high point in the grid, they're not going to give you an inch if they can.
Very true, very true. I actually wish, if there wasn't freaking copyright claims, I wish I could add into the podcast that video that I sent you guys over the group, to show that battle between Ocon for Pete's sake, between Alonso and Russell. Because I mean, even you guys commented on the group, what a battle. And it was so clean. And I mean, even Alonso, I mean, hats off to Alonso. We know how ruthless Alonso is on track. He's sometimes merciless. But even Alonso said post-race, when the team told him it was Russell ahead of him, he said by himself, he wished it was any other driver except Russell, because he knows how hard Russell works just to get his first points for Williams. And obviously you're racing for your own team. If they were in the same team, Alonso might have been, let's have Russell have the glory. But it's two different teams for different points, different places in the championship. Alonso has to push and go for the overtake. But the amount of maturity and gentleman's racing that Alonso showed, and I mean, after the race, you saw in that video, Alonso got out of his car, went straight to Russell and gave him a bloody hug. And they even exchanged helmets after the race. That's Alonso's goal this year. He's taking every driver's helmet, but not the point.
I would yours and yours and yours and yours.
Yes, but I mean, he took Russell's helmet because Russell earned Alonso's respect.
Yeah.
And that was for me. That was just like, oh, freaking hell. It was just such a beautiful moment. And I mean, Alonso has said it to Russell before. He himself said Russell is a guaranteed world champion if he gets the right car underneath him. And Russell's got the talent. But that was an honest, exceptional battle. Moving on to the next topic of talk. Guys, even though Russell lost out to Alonso, what an absolutely fantastic weekend from Russell. When it comes to qualifying, he was the driver of the weekend. Even with Norris in his P2, Russell took the cake. The first time since Monza 2018 that Williams have shown in a Q3 session.
Yeah, and for me, it was like, where did he get that pace?
If you look at the onboard lap, that was an absolutely sensational lap.
And he got into Q3 on the medium tire, not even the soft tire.
Yeah, he was on the mediums. And look, it was just by 6/1000ths of a second, but that's the margins in Formula One. Whether you get in by an inch or by a mile, Russell made it in on medium tires. That is honestly, Russell is Mr. Saturday. Honestly, when it comes to performances like that, Russell is Mr. Saturday, dragging that absolute donkey of a Williams up into Q3 ahead of both the Alpines. He out-qualified, who was it in Q3? I think he out-qualified Stroll even in Q3. He was ahead of an Aston Martin. Yeah. Russell is just, he's once again going into that overdrive gear, and I love seeing it. Of all the British drivers on the grid, I have to say, I like Russell the most. Demi and Jadepie are going to kill me because they are Norris lovers. But when it comes to the three British drivers, which are Hamilton, Norris, and Russell, I have to say, out of the three of them, Russell is my favorite. And I just love to see Russell performing like this. It's so good for him. And if what happens with me, what we talked about in the previous podcast, if he gets that seat at Mercedes, very sorry to burst Lewis Hamilton's bubble, but Hamilton has got a problem.
What happened when that one time when Russell drove the Mercedes last year is going to happen with Hamilton.
Yeah, he's going to have, literally, like I said in the previous podcast, Russell and Rosberg both are Rs. He's going to have an R problem.
Yeah, he's going to have an R problem.
But, I mean, so close to points in the race, literally happening on the final few laps, losing that position. I think it was on lap 68 of 71 where Russell got overtaken by Alonso. But still, absolutely phenomenal weekend from George Russell. He is a quality driver. Into the next topic. Even with a wounded car, Mercedes still kept Bottas behind Hamilton. I think it was for 8 laps. Norris, after his 5-second penalty, went on an absolute charge. A few laps into his charge, everybody obviously realized Lewis was driving a wounded car in P2. Bottas was in P3, Norris in P4. Why did it take Mercedes 8 bloody laps to actually tell Bottas, okay, you can now overtake Hamilton? They even said on the team radio, Valtteri, we're not yet racing. Lewis, please keep pace. Not overtake, please keep pace. You can't do that. I know Lewis is in the championship fight. But that is not Bottas's fault. It's not Bottas's fault Lewis ran over the sausage curb at the exit of turn 1. Lewis was pushing, obviously trying to hoping something went wrong with Verstappen so he could catch him. But it's not Bottas's fault. And if they kept Bottas behind Hamilton for say 2-3 more laps, Norris would not have ended in P3. He would have passed Bottas as well. Mercedes nearly cost Bottas a P2 in that race. And I mean, even when Bottas passed Lewis and Norris also passed Lewis, Norris was still busy catching Bottas. It was so nip and tuck for those final two podium positions. Mercedes need to stop prioritizing Hamilton in such extreme scenarios. If Bottas is the quicker driver and your first driver is driving a car which has got floor damage, let the other driver pass.
Yeah, it's just like, for me, it shows where the priorities is, and they were so desperate to give Hamilton as many points as possible, and they almost ruined it for themselves for almost giving Norris a P2.
Yes, Mercedes almost ruined both their drivers' weekends.
And
not just Hamilton's, but they almost ruined both of their drivers' weekends.
And to be honest, I think if it comes back to that, I think they will do the same because Bottas, he's P5 or P4 in the driver.
I think no. Norris with his P2 or with his P3 is still ahead of Bottas. No. Yes, he is still ahead of Bottas because Perez is now P3 in the Drivers' Championship. Norris P4 just behind him, and Bottas is behind Norris in P5.
And with that, I think they actually need to prioritize Bottas getting the better points. Yes, I know Hamilton is in a fight, but if Bottas stays in P5 and Perez keeps getting
good results.
Keep getting good results and staying ahead of Bottas in the drivers. That will reflect the constructors.
Exactly, because your constructors championship is just your two drivers' points combined. And the thing is, Bottas needs to get ahead of not just Norris but Perez as well if Mercedes wants any hope of winning the constructors. And they nearly cost themselves the 2 weeks ago in Austria. We're already on the week of Silverstone. I can't believe it. But yeah, it's just Mercedes. I don't know. We talked about it in previous podcasts. I talked about it with Jonny. I talked about it with you in the previous one. Why are Mercedes so toxic towards Bottas? I'm not asking you to answer that because we will never know. But it's the problem for me is, are they going to do that if Russell gets in that car?
For me is, we know Russell, it's bad to say, but Russell is faster than Bottas.
Yes.
So Russell will, I think that he will, if they start the season with close to each other and Russell gets better results than Hamilton and he's just faster, Russell will force Mercedes to not
prioritize
Hamilton because Russell is doing better.
I get that, and Valtteri has never done that. Valtteri has never put Mercedes in that position. I just hope that they don't keep doing this because they've made it clear that Lewis is their golden boy until he retires, and I don't want that for George Russell. He's got so much potential, so much speed. He's the full package, and honestly, I hope that Mercedes don't do that. But let's move on to the next topic, and that is Bottas actually had a good race. Unlike the previous few weeks, I mean, France was decent, Styria was decent, Monaco they're just unfortunate, but Baku was terrible. We're not going to talk about Baku, but he actually had a good race, and if it wasn't for Mercedes keeping him behind his teammate, Valtteri really could have had a solid P2 finish, not crossing the line just ahead of Norris. So, honestly, this weekend from Bottas, much better. And this is the type of performances he needs to keep putting in.
Yeah, this is the performance he needs to keep putting in. So we'll have to see if he keeps that train going.
Yes, and I really hope he does. But there's not really much more to say about that. No. Just well done to Bottas. But guys, one team that I wanna stop at, that people are really giving them such a hard time, is AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri are the only team on that grid with the softer tyre allocation for Austria. that tried a 2-stop. And Gasly, yes, they could have gotten more points, but Gasly still got points. Tsunoda unfortunately was heavily stuck in traffic after his pit stop. AlphaTauri did not plan good with Tsunoda's pit stop. But hats off to AlphaTauri, the only team to try a 2-stop in that Austrian Grand Prix, and Gasly still made it into the points. Yes, it could have been a P6 maybe, not a P9, but the point is they had their backs against the wall. They realized with their early pit stop off of the mediums that they made a mistake, but they tried to bounce back. And honestly, well done to AlphaTauri for trying something out of the box and actually freaking hell, Pierre freaking Gasly still getting points. Hey guys, that is the end of part 1 of the Austrian Grand Prix podcast. If you've made it to this part of the video, you can basically just leave a like, subscribe if you are new, check out the links in the description down below, and go to part 2, which will already be posted. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and me and Boosted will see you guys in part number 2. Bye!